Welcome to Trap Think, where we help you escape the reactive thinking that's turning your brain into tribal mush. I'm your host, Darren. Today's episode is a little different. No deep dive into manipulation tactics, no pattern matching against color revolution playbooks, just a letter, I guess. An open letter to people who've been exiled from their tribes. If you're Gen X and you used to consider yourself liberal, but now feel like the liberal left has lost its mind somewhere along the way, this one's for you. And if you've ever gotten the question, what happened to you, from someone who used to be a friend, this one's for you too. And if you've been standing in the middle wondering where everyone went, this one's especially for you. Let's get into it. A woman by the name of Jenny Holland posted a video recently. She runs a Substack and has a YouTube channel, and they're both called Saving Culture from Itself. She's Gen X like me. She used to be liberal. She used to read The Atlantic and Harper's on the train, and she used to drink cheap beer at dive bars in Brooklyn before they all became cannabis dispensaries. In a recent video, she describes waking up with a Belle and Sebastian song in her head and spending days listening to albums that soundtracked her late 90s New York life. Rooftop parties, dive bars, seeing friends' bands play, dance parties and Dumbo lofts when the streets were still pitch dark at night. The whole aesthetic of being young and urban and culturally aware in the late 90s. And then she describes realizing that out of her entire social circle from those days, the childhood friends, the college friends, the work friends, the bar friends, the friends of friends, she can only be honest about her politics with about 4 people. 4. In this video I stumbled upon, she calls herself an apostate, someone who left the faith. And she describes what that feels like, the moment you realize that if certain people knew what you actually thought, they would physically recoil, maybe call you a Nazi, maybe just never speak to you again. She got a message recently passed through a friend, someone from the old days who wanted to know, what happened to Jenny? When did she turn into a right-wing freak? She laughed when she heard it, but it's the kind of laugh that has some grief in it. The what happened to you question. Everyone who's walked this path has gotten some version of it. Bill Maher gets this constantly. He's been doing the same show for decades, holding essentially the same positions. Free speech absolutism, skepticism of religious thinking, whether it's Christian or woke, distrust of moral panics, belief in due process and classic liberal values. He hasn't moved, but the ground shifted under him, and suddenly he's a right-wing talking point. Conservatives quote him now. Liberals who used to love him share articles about how he's become problematic. He keeps saying it. I didn't leave the left left me. And you can argue about whether that's true, whether the left actually changed or whether Maher just got old and cranky. People do get more conservative as they age. That's been true forever. But Maher isn't alone. That's the thing. If it were just one guy, you could write it off as an individual drift. But it's not one guy. Elon Musk, the guy who built electric cars and tried to solve climate change and put solar panels on roofs, darling of the progressive tech crowd. Well, he's bought Twitter, and now he posts memes, and everyone who loved him 5 years ago acts like he was always a villain. Joe Rogan, the comedian who had Bernie Sanders on his podcast and said he'd probably vote for him, who talked openly about drug experiences and alternative lifestyles and questions authority constantly. Now he's dangerous misinformation, and he must be stopped. Tulsi Gabbard literally ran for the Democratic presidential nomination. She served in the military, held progressive positions on most issues. Now she's what? A Russian asset? A traitor? All because she asked questions about foreign policy that her party didn't want asked. Megyn Kelly. She started at Fox, which already made her suspicious to liberals, but she pushed back on Trump. She's asked hard questions. She's tried to stake out independent ground. Now she's firmly quoted as quote-unquote right-wing, even though her actual positions are kind of all over the map. Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald broke the Snowden story. Hero of the civil liberties left, the guy who exposed government surveillance overreach. Now he's a useful idiot for fascism because he applies the same skepticism to democratic power that he applied to Republican power. Matt Taibbi, Rolling Stone journalist, documented the 2008 financial crisis better than anyone. Called Goldman Sachs a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity. Now he's a right-wing grifter because he reported on government censorship of social media. The list keeps growing. Every month, it seems, someone new gets exiled. Someone who is solidly in the liberal camp wakes up one day and realizes the camp moved while they were sleeping. And some of these people genuinely did change their positions. I'm not saying everyone's exactly the same as they were in 1998. People evolve. They encounter new information. They have experiences that shift their thinking. But the pattern is striking. These aren't people who suddenly discovered Ayn Rand and started worshiping at the altar of Reagan. These are people who looked around one day and realized that the tribe that they thought that they belonged to had redefined the membership requirements while they weren't paying attention. In her video, Jenny puts it well. She quotes another apostate, Megan Murphy, a feminist writer who got exiled for saying biological sex is real. Murphy described being seen as an uncompassionate MAGA pick-me for saying things people don't like. That's it. Not for changing positions, for holding positions that used to be mainstream liberal but somehow became unspeakable. What happened to you, Megan? You used to be smart. Now you keep saying things I don't like. That's the accusation. You used to be smart. Translation, you used to agree with us. You used to be inside the tribe. Now you're saying things that make us uncomfortable, which means you've gotten stupid or evil or corrupted somehow. It can't be that you thought it through and came to a different conclusion. It can't be that reasonable people might disagree. It has to be something that happened to you, some moral or intellectual failure or something. And here's the thing about all these apostates. They frame it as switching sides. They had to find a new tribe. They went from being cool liberal urbanites to reluctantly discovering that the only people who wouldn't recoil from their opinions were, as Jenny puts it, rednecks, Christians, lifelong anti-commies, the kind of people we used to make fun of at the bar, she says. Jenny found God. She prays the rosary now. She goes to bat for Trump, and she's found a new home, a new identity, a new group that'll have her. Well, I want to offer a different frame, because I was one of those people at the bar. I was the Christian kid in the 90s. I wasn't political exactly, but I had opinions that didn't fit the cool crowd. I went to church. I believed things that would have made Jenny's Brooklyn friends physically recoil. And yet, I didn't see it as sides. I had friends across the spectrum. My gay roommate, my agnostic coworkers, my liberal family members. We didn't agree about everything. We still don't. But we didn't have to. And here's what I want to say to Jenny and to Bill Maher and to Elon, Rogan, and anyone else who's had the "what happened to you" conversation. Welcome back. We missed you. Not welcome back to our side. Not glad you finally saw the light. Not I told you so. Just, hey, good to see you again. Because here's the truth that the liberal framing obscures. There was always a group of people who didn't buy into the sorting, who thought you could disagree about politics and still be friends, who thought the gay roommate and the church kid could care about each other without one of them having to convert. We've been here the whole time, holding this space, wondering where everyone went. I'm afraid we're small. Well, we were always small. Gen X is a small generation to begin with. The ones who paid attention to what was happening with tribal capture, even smaller. And the ones who actually resisted it, smaller still. But we're here, and the door never really closed. The question is whether the apostates can see it. Because right now, most of them are doing what Jenny did. They found a new tribe. They traded Brooklyn rooftop parties for a different set of people who will accept them. And that's understandable. Humans need belonging. Exile is painful. When your old tribe kicks you out, finding a new one feels like survival. But the new tribe has membership requirements too. It always does. And eventually, if you're actually a person who thinks for themselves, you'll bump up against those requirements just like you bumped up against the old ones. The rednecks and Christians and lifelong anti-commies, they're people too. Good people, many of them. But they have their own orthodoxies, their own things you can't say, their own ways of making you feel like an outsider if you don't perform the right signals. Jenny went from liberal apostate to conservative convert. She found God. She prays the rosary. She goes to bat for Trump. And I'm not criticizing any of that. Maybe she genuinely believes all of that. I believe she does. Maybe she found her home. But I noticed that she's still thinking in terms of sides, still framing her identity around which team she's on, still defending herself against the tribe that rejected her. That's not escape. That's just a different cage. So let me tell you about the generation that invented the internet and then watched it eat itself. Gen X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980. The small generation, sandwiched between the massive boomer wave and the even more massive millennial wave. We're easy to forget. There aren't enough of us to move elections or dominate marketing demographics, but we are loud. The baby boomers are sandwiched between the silent generation and us, the loud generation. We were MTV when MTV still played music before it just went kaput. Neon colors, skateboard culture, grunge and gangster rap. We invented the attitude that everyone else eventually co-opted. We were Apple's Think Different campaign. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes. That was us. That was our energy. Before Apple became the most valuable company on earth with a phone in every pocket tracking our every move and selling our data, before Think Different became think what we tell you or we'll remove your app from the store. We were the original hackers, not because we were all tech geniuses, but because we figured out how to work around systems, how to get into places we weren't supposed to, how to do things without permission or supervision. Our whole childhood was an exercise in unauthorized access. We were the latchkey kids. Our parents were at work. We let ourselves in after school and figured things out. Nobody was tracking our location. Nobody was scheduling our play dates. We were feral in ways that would get parents arrested today. We stayed out until the streetlights came on. That was the rule. When the lights turned on, you went home. Until then, you were somewhere in the neighborhood and your parents had no idea where. You could be at a friend's house. You could be in the woods. You could be on the roof of the elementary school throwing rocks at birds. We navel-gazed in parking lots. We broke windows. We stole chewing gum and cigarettes from the corner store. Some of us got caught. Most of us didn't. And here's the thing. You'll never know about any of it. We didn't document everything. We didn't share every thought we had with the entire world. We lived in obscure spaces where nobody was watching. Nobody was recording. Nobody was building a permanent archive of our stupidity. We built the internet. Not all of us personally, but our generation. The early web was GenX energy. Chaotic, creative, anarchic. Nobody in charge, bulletin boards and IRC channels and websites that looked like ransom notes. It was ugly, but it was weird and was free. And then we watched it turn into something else entirely. We watched the platforms take over. We watched the algorithms start sorting people. We watched social media transform from here's my weird thoughts to here's my performance of the correct opinions. We watched our invention become a machine for manufacturing tribes and enforcing conformity. And because we remember before, we can see what was lost. Younger generations don't have that reference point. If you were born in 1995, you don't remember a world before the sorting. You grew up inside the algorithm. The fishbowl is just the world to you. You can't see the walls because you've never been outside them. But Gen X remembers outside. We remember when you could have a controversial opinion and your friends would argue with you about it over beers and then you would all go see a movie together. We remember when disagreement was entertainment, not exile. We remember when your political opinions were just one small part of who you were, not your entire identity. We remember when people kept some things private, when you didn't broadcast your trauma to strangers, when you didn't need external validation for every thought and feeling, when you could just be a person without performing personhood for an audience. Now I know how this sounds. Well, back in my day, nostalgia. Old man yells at the cloud, okay, boomer. Except we're not even boomers. We're the forgotten middle child generation that nobody remembers to insult. And yet the kids make fun of us. You were born in the 1900s. We're becoming a punchline. The generation that still uses Facebook. The generation that doesn't understand TikTok. The generation that still says things like, back when MTV played music, as if anyone under 30 even knows what that means. Fine, we're old, we're out of touch, we're a joke. But here's what we're not. We're not captured. Or at least, we don't have to be. We have something the younger generations don't have. Memory. We remember the before times, before algorithmic echo chambers, before virtue signaling became survival strategy, before you had to perform your tribal loyalty constantly or face exile. That memory is worth something. Not because the past was perfect. It wasn't. We had our own problems, our own blind spots, our own ways of sorting people into acceptable and unacceptable. I'm not pretending like the 90s were some golden age of tolerance and understanding. It wasn't. But we had space, physical and psychological space. Room to think without being watched. Room to be wrong without it being archived forever. Room to change your mind without someone digging up your old posts to prove that you're a hypocrite. Well, that space is gone now. And most people don't even know it's missing because they never had it. Well, Gen X knows. We felt it disappear. So when Jenny Holland describes the exile, the shrinking of her world from a huge social circle down to 4 people she can be honest with, I recognize what she's mourning. She's mourning the space. The room to be a full person with complicated, contradictory, evolving positions. That space still exists, but you have to build it deliberately now. You have to carve it out. You have to refuse the sorting. And Gen X might be the generation best positioned to do that. Not because we're smarter or better, but because we remember what we are trying to rebuild. The question is whether we'll do it, or whether we'll just keep switching tribes, trading one cage for another and calling it freedom. So here's where I'm supposed to give you like a call to action, something to do. Start a movement, sign a petition, share this podcast with 10 friends. I'm not going to do that, although you could share this podcast with 10 friends. Because all of that is the trap too. The constant pressure to perform, to signal, to do something visible that proves you're on the right side, whatever side that is. I just want to describe a place that does exist. It's small. I said that already, but it bears repeating. We're not a movement. We're not a coalition. We're not organized. We don't have funding from billionaire foundations or training programs that scale to 200,000 people. We're just people who refuse the frame. People who decided that having a friend matters more than having a correct friend. People who think you can disagree about abortion and still help each other move apartments. People who don't need everyone in their life to share their political view. This used to be normal. It used to be so normal that nobody even talked about it. You had your opinions. Your neighbor had different opinions, and you still borrowed each other's lawnmowers. Now it feels radical. It feels like a stance. So in my early 20s, I had a roommate. They were gay. I went to church and believed in Jesus. According to the current tribal logic, we should have been enemies. Or at best, I should have been trying to convert them while they accused me of being a bigot. Instead, we were friends. We shared groceries. We watched movies. We talked about life and work and relationships. We cared about each other as people. Not despite our differences, just alongside them. Our differences were one small part of a much larger friendship. And honestly, our differences weren't all that important. So that's it. That's the whole thing. That's what I'm inviting people back to. Jenny Holland's video kind of paints a picture of people holding hands across the aisle. That metaphor stays with me. Two people standing on opposite sides of something, reaching across and choosing connection over division. The hand is still extended. It's been extended the whole time, but you have to be willing to reach back, and that means letting go of something. It means letting go of the identity, the apostate identity, the convert identity, the I used to be X but now I'm Y identity that gives you a new tribe and a new set of approved opinions and a new group of people who will still validate you. Because here's what I want to say to Jenny and everyone else who's walked that path. You didn't switch sides. You just remembered something. You remembered that you're a person, a whole person, not a collection of political positions, not a tribal membership card, not a performance of the correct opinions for the correct audience. You're allowed to have complicated, inconsistent, evolving ideas about things. You're allowed to agree with conservatives on some issues and liberals on others, and libertarians on even others, and nobody for that matter. You're allowed to hold positions that don't fit any party platform. You're allowed to be a person who prays the rosary and listens to Bell and Sebastian, a person who supports border enforcement and thinks ICE sometimes goes too far, a person who believes in traditional marriage and has friends who don't. The tribes will tell you that that's incoherent. You have to pick. These positions are incompatible. They're not. They're only incompatible inside of the tribal frame. Outside that frame, they're just a person thinking for themselves, trying to figure it out. That's what's on offer here. Not a new side, not a better tribe, just permission to be a person. Now, it's lonely sometimes. I won't pretend it isn't. When everyone around you is sorted into Team Red or Team Blue and you're standing here saying, I don't think these teams are real. You feel like a crazy person. You feel like maybe you're the one who's wrong, because surely if everyone else sees the world this way, there must be something to it, right? There isn't. The teams are a trap. The sorting is a trap. They need to belong so badly that you'll let a tribe tell you what to think. That's the deepest trap of all. And escaping it doesn't mean you're alone. It just means the people who see it clearly are scattered. We find each other in weird places, in comment sections, in podcast audiences, in conversations that start with, wait, you think that way too? We're small, but we're real. So to Jenny and Bill Maher and to everyone else who's been told, what happened to you, by the people who used to be friends, you're welcome here. Not because you switched to the right side, but because there is no right side. There's just people trying to be honest, trying to figure things out, trying to stay connected across the differences. The door is open. It always was. Come on in. This has been TrapThink, and I'm Darren. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Not because I need the validation, though let's be honest, who doesn't? But because finding each other is kind of the point. If you know someone who's been exiled from their tribe, maybe share this with them. Not as a recruitment pitch, but just as a, hey, you're not alone. And if you're Jenny Holland and you somehow hear this, I meant what I said. Welcome back. The hand is still extended. Stay curious, stay honest, stay human. Oh, and one more thing. If you listen to this whole episode and your main takeaway is, yeah, those liberals really did go crazy, or yeah, those conservatives really are more welcoming, you missed the point. The point isn't that one tribe is better than the other. The point is that the tribes are the problem. So try again. Thanks. See you next time.